Hello everyone, welcome to the Global Business Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Philpott. Hello everyone and welcome to the show. If you haven't been with us before, this is a show where I get to speak to business leaders and business owners across the world about how they're navigating their way through COVID-19, lockdowns, quarantines, re-emerging, all those things. The idea is that we share ideas here online and people get to hear of all the great innovative ideas that people are coming up with for their businesses. If you love podcasts, well, I've got two other shows, the Global Travel Channel, over 150 episodes there where I've spoken to people all around the world about their amazing travel experiences. We don't just talk about travel destinations, no, we get up close and personal with the guests and find out how travel has changed their lives. I also do a show called Humanity Inspires. This is a freestyle conversation show where I talk to people all across the world about everyday topics and events that are affecting them in their lives, and we have real conversations. So check those two out, Global Travel Channel, Humanity Inspires. I'll put the links in the show notes today so you can find those. But let's get on with the business show, and today I've got another great guest lined up. Let's go and meet him right now. So it's a very warm welcome to the Global Business Podcast today to Mr. Anthony Perl. Anthony, how are you?
I'm really great. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fabulous, thanks. And we were just both talking offline about your excursions up this way to beautiful Queensland with your family on holiday. And whereabouts in the world are you today?
I'm in Sydney, in the not so great looking Sydney today. It's a bit overcast and a bit cold, but and remembering fondly those days at the beginning of the year up in Queensland in Noosa area.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, for people listening all over the world today, Sydney is usually what you see in the postcards and everything else, but every now and again they have 1 or 2 days that are a bit cloudy and grey, don't they, Anthony, down there?
Just once in a blue moon.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to have a good chat about business on the show today, and I thought we'd start off by you perhaps telling everyone what you do for business.
Yeah, thanks. Look, my business is called Com Together, and I've been at this for about 10 years as a business owner, and it's a communications and marketing business at its basic form. So what I like to say is we build brands and grow audiences. And we really stretch from doing things that start at that foundation element of brands right through to ongoing work. And the other entry point that I've found in recent years for clients is around websites. And often websites lead to branding and vice versa. So it's sort of been a natural synergy that's happened. And then, as I said, everything in between.
So you've been doing it for around about 10 years?
10 years has come together, but I've been in the communications and marketing game for probably closer to 30 years. So it's, been a long haul, but an interesting one and gone through various changes and adapting to different situations over the years.
So was it a dream industry for you to get into in the beginning 30 years ago? Was it something you always wanted to do?
Interestingly enough, I mean, my original dream was always in and around radio. I was, and that was where I first ended up, initially in sport and then in news. Working for, talkback radio was something that I was completely fascinated with and still am to a large degree, though it doesn't exist in quite the same way that it maybe did when I was younger. And I always had that fascination for how these amazing broadcasters could deliver images in your mind and focus you on issues without you having to see them. And that ability to use words rather than just being forced into images was always something that intrigued me. And I actually struggled a little bit when I went into TV for a little while, because TV relies so much on images first and then the audio coming second, and I really like it the other way around.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I've recently started another podcast show called Humanity Inspires, and it's a conversation podcast where I just get guests from all over the world and we have, I guess, a freestyle range of conversations about whatever's topical on the day. And I'm finding that really intriguing, because I think we're getting less and less used to having deep and meaning conversations in life these days, right? Everything's in 240 odd characters, or we just like something and make a short comment. And I think there's still that art of having a really deep, meaningful conversation, particularly with strangers.
Yeah, it's really fascinating that the statistics of how long the concentration span is now talking in, a couple of seconds. That if you're publishing a video online, that it's about the headline, it's about being under 2 minutes, it's about having subtitles there. It's all of these things which are quite counterintuitive in many senses. I was having this conversation with someone this week about how the younger generation don't know how to have a conversation because they actually don't pick up the phone. They communicate everything via text message, and they type it 100 times faster than I'll ever be able to type a text message. But they don't, the idea of picking up the phone and speaking even to a friend just really somehow throws them enormously. Whereas, I've grown up on that, that idea of, we used to line up for the phone between my sister and I, who was going to get to use the phone first, and the other one was pestering the other one to get off the line because there was only one line and you could only be on for so long.
Yeah.
And my wife was even worse because she's from the UK, and they had timed local phone calls. So her dad was constantly at it saying, "Get off the phone, so we can actually, so it's not costing us a fortune." So people don't remember those days very well anymore because we've all got the phones in our pocket, and it seems to be that messages are easier than talking.
Yeah, also fascinating how communication's also evolving when you talk about, radio and television. Now you've got the podcast world, which I'm part of, and finding it quite fascinating that some of the most successful podcasts in the world today are conversational podcasts that do last for 2 or 3 hours at a time. So there's a bucking of the trend in terms of, this whole notion around attention spans of human beings, and that we are only conditioned to look at things for a short period of time. Podcasting is starting to prove otherwise, that people are hungry for that kind of content.
I think what is really fantastic about podcasts is that it doesn't rely on it being live. So the hard thing always about radio, and what I was always conscious of when I was producing Talkback, is that people are tuning in and out at any given time, and so you're really trying to keep things moving along, because having that long and deep and meaningful conversation means that if someone's tuned in and missed the first few minutes, they've missed the first few minutes. Podcasting allows you to listen to it in your own time, to stop and start as you want to. And I think that's why being able to get a little bit deeper into things is really a strength of podcasting. And I'm with you on that. I mean, I've often gone for a long walk, more so in the summer than in the winter, and love to listen to something that's deep and meaningful for an hour rather than lots of little bursts of things. So I think it is a bucking of the trend.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, let's get back to your business. And you started it 10 years ago, this particular one that you're doing now. What inspired you to start the business back then 10 years ago?
Yeah, it was a story I heard at the time. I'm giving away my age. I'm 49 now. So I was 39, and I heard an interview with Jerry Harvey and John Singleton. And they said in the course of that interview, they were talking about being entrepreneurs and the like. And they said, if you haven't got out on your own by the time you're 40, you're never going to do it. And it kind of stuck in the back of my mind. And I'd been working for a non-for-profit organization for a few years, and I'd done as much as I could possibly do. Without going into the full story, I took them to the heights that I could possibly take them to. And I came back from a holiday and said to the CEO, I think it's time that I moved on, because I don't think there's much more I can do here. And so we left in a mutual beneficial way, and I took a short-term contract with another organization, which ended up completely restructuring while I was there. And I just had the opportunity then to just say, you know what, I'm going to just go out on my own. So I made the leap literally with no plan, no business name. I had no potential clients, and I gave myself a very short window to say, right, I think I gave myself 3 months to say I've got to get one client in order to keep me moving. And then it was sort of by the end of the 3 months, I said, well, at least I need one more client so I can get to 6 months. And it just kept building from there. And here we are 10 years later. And, it's been an amazing journey, but it was really just jumping ship and taking a risk at that point in time. And as much inspired by two great entrepreneurs and just that willingness, and always in the back of my mind to say, I think I'd prefer to be on my own.
Fantastic story. Now, there's a lot of people listening today, I'm sure, who are in the throes of thinking about starting their own organization. So with the wonderful element of hindsight and looking back at when you started your organization, what was some of the things that you can pass on as tips looking back now that you either did do or wished you'd done when you started your organization?
Yeah, look, and it's something that, interesting enough, that I'm involved with almost day to day with a lot of my clients, whether they are in startup mode or whether they've been around forever and a day. It's those foundational elements of marketing which I actually find are the bits that people miss the most. If you don't sit down and work out the basics of things like your vision, mission, and values, your why, your purpose, and then defining the business, and obviously looking at the personas of who your audience is or is going to be, they're the things that really set the foundations for you. So if you don't do those things, you're not going to end up with a sustainable business. And I think that's something that, the businesses will adapt over time because needs change. But if you don't have those elements in place, then you're missing something. And I think it does take people a little while to realize the importance of that. And many businesses don't. And I've done some studies on this kind of thing as well. And the fact of the matter is that most businesses completely, and non-for-profits are even more guilty of this, I think, don't do those foundational elements. And that's the thing that I think really is the biggest thing to get right from the beginning.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's related to the fact that there's so much emotion involved in starting a business, because you have an idea and you think, okay, the world's going to buy this from me. And you put all this physical energy into getting that idea to a stage where you just want people to buy it or listen to you talking about it or whatever it is. And you're right, the fundamentals, I'm surprised globally, because I've also done some studies on this, how many small businesses don't even have a business plan.
Yeah, it's quite amazing to me that people don't think about those really simple, what seems simple elements. But if you don't get your brand right, then how can you possibly expect your businesses to succeed? And I think a lot of the time it's that, it's that old analogy of a square peg into a round hole, but that's often what people have, is they're fixated on a particular idea and then they just try and ram it home and create the market for it. And I think it's losing track of that. You have to engage with people and understand where they're at and what they demand and which audience you're going to choose to go for, and pitch your brand at that particular level. That's a really important aspect of starting up a new business, and it's something you need to review annually, because the market is constantly changing. And I know what I set out thinking that I would do is not exactly what I've ended up doing. And, part of that is delivering websites. I never imagined that a large chunk of my business would be delivering websites for people. But the fact of the matter is that, websites and branding are intrinsically linked, because they're the front line of your business. And it is something that I think also people get completely wrong in a startup phase. They opt for the very cheap do-it-yourself solutions or the cookie cutter approach. And so what you end up with is something that looks like everybody else rather than something that appeals to an audience. So they start off with the wrong view of what they should be producing, put the wrong parameters around it in terms of budgets and things, and end up with something which is a long way from where they should be. And, I've got this case with a client that I'm working with at the moment who are in a startup phase, and they've got a great business in terms of what they're producing. And when I first engaged with them, I looked at their website, as you do, and I said to them, so your target market is just this group. And they kind of said to me, no, why would you think that? And I said, well, did you look at the photograph that's on the front of your website? And you're telling me that the audience is something over the other side and doing all of these other things, and it's not just limited to this. You've actually put people off immediately on your website.
Right. Yeah, fascinating. In that, what's your advice to a startup organisation that doesn't have the budget to go and spend on money with people like you in a consultancy sense? What advice do you give them to making sure that they get those things, closer to right than wrong?
Yeah, well, as I said, starting off with things like mission, vision, and values is important, and there's plenty of materials available online to get you started in thinking how that should be pulled together. And I think from there, in terms of a website, when you're building that, you need a web presence, but don't think of it as a budgetary constraint. Think of it more in terms of, what does your audience want to hear from you? What do they need to hear from you? Where you want to take them in terms of basic messages? Because often a website is, yes, it needs to be beautiful. Yes, it needs to be functional. But more importantly than anything else, it needs to carry the right messages to the right audiences. And that is what you need to be thinking about, whether it's for your website, whether it's for a brochure, whether it's for, just talking to people. Get those fundamentals worked out, and it's stuff you can do yourself. Then you only need to nail one or two clients to actually go from what you might have as a holding page website, with something simple on it, with just some simple text and, full website coming soon, with a plan to say, what, we do need to spend a bit of money on building a website. And there are also opportunities as well where you can, pay off a website over a period of time. And that's one of the things that I've seen change as well, is that, you're building structured programs with people, and as I do often, where it's not a case necessarily of a website being a big whack of money in a short period of time. It can be staggered over a longer period, 12 to 24 months sometimes, and sometimes even longer. So there are opportunities out there. It's about, you've got to remember that your website is your front office, and it does set the tone for people. And so, it's easy if you don't have the budget to do something decent at the beginning, then you need to find out how you're going to get that budget in order to really start engaging audiences.
Yeah, very good pieces of advice there. And let's face it, at the end of the day, the credibility of your organisation comes through those first few seconds of looking online at what you've got to offer, doesn't it?
It does, and it's much the same as when people, when I talk to clients, people about marketing. People think of marketing as they often get confused with it being advertising, and they also think of marketing in terms of, it's just a logo. But in actual fact, marketing is a lot broader than that, and it's as simple as the way you project yourself when you have a conversation with anyone, how you look, what you say. All of these things are part of your brand and part of how you're marketing to someone. And if you get that right, then you have a much greater chance of expanding your business. And I'll give you a perfect example. Many years ago, I was looking for a financial planner, and I asked around a few friends and for some advice. Does anyone know anyone? And I sat down in some big and small offices with different financial planners, and none of them were quite right to me. And I was just had it left there. And anyway, my wife turns around one weekend and says, we're catching up with these people that I met from a baby class that she'd been in at the time with our young kids. And I said, really? I don't know these people. Who, what's the story? And I was also aware that they were a little bit older than us. Not that matters too much, but I just thought, I just don't have anything in common with this. Anyway, we get thrown into this, and as soon as we get there, the guy, his name's Rob, said to me, listen, we're going to go and pick up some pizzas. We've ordered them from here. You and I will jump in the car and we'll go collect it. Sure, no problems. And I said, what do you do, Rob? I'm a financial planner. And I said, I said, that's interesting. I've actually been looking for a financial planner. And he said, I bet what you need is ABC, because I know kind of your background is sort of like this, XYZ. And in the space of less than a minute, and he was not pitching at all, he nailed absolutely who I was, what I needed, and had a great understanding of where potentially I could go. And we didn't carry the conversation any further than that. And then the next day, the Monday, I rang him in the office and I said, enjoyed yesterday. It was great. You said something to me in the car. I really think you would be the right person to be my financial planner. I know we're becoming friends here, but are you okay with that? And he's been my financial planner ever since. You know?
Some would say the universe brought you two together.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. But I think the fascinating thing is taking the time to understand people and adjust your pitch and deliver it in a way that resonates with your audience is absolutely critical. And it's those fundamentals that you have to get right from the beginning. And that's stuff that you've just got to work on with yourself. You know, it's not, yes, you know what? Professionals like me will come in and we will help you refine it and we'll take it to the next level. But when you're in startup mode, there is basics of this that you can do yourself and get right, and know that this is a starting point and keep working on it. You know, because it changes all the time, and try it out on friends and see what works and what doesn't work. You know, there are words that make all of the difference. You know, there's a story I heard many years ago of a hypnotherapist who was writing a book and trying to crack the market with women. His book was about weight loss, and he wanted to help women lose weight, and it really wasn't resonating at all. And what he found was, and this may have changed, but at the time, that women actually don't want to lose weight; they actually want to look thinner. And there is a psychological difference between the two, and the language change completely shifted his ability to grab an audience. And that's where it is. You have to trial these different things that will resonate. And, you know, it will change. You know, we always hear about buzzwords and things, and that part of that is that. But it is, finding those words that make a difference to people, because it is a psychological process as well.
Yeah, really good points there. And as we know, business is a continuous evolution of itself, and probably no more so than at the times we're living in now. So I want to take you back to January 2020 and pre-COVID-19, probably everywhere in the world that we know of today. And I want to get your thoughts around what was 2020 looking like for you from a business sense. What did you have planned for this year before everything changed?
Yeah, it's interesting for me, because the plan was to do many of the things that I ended up doing, and it was more about the pace that the way I had planned things out. There were certain things that I was looking at, kind of 3-4 month slots of trying to build some momentum and trying to look at how I might pick up some new clients, as you're always wanting to do, and satisfy the existing clients. I was looking at some, I've been building some new products in the background, and was looking at how slowly that might be integrated into what I do. And then, and one of them in particular, I was kind of the mindset that, maybe the market's not quite ready for this. Do we, kind of put it on hold until later in the year when I can develop it a little bit further. And so it was really a case of, it had been a really busy end to 2019 for me. So it was a well-earned break, and it was more about just taking a deep breath in and going, okay, am I ready for the next 12 months to continue on and with some existing clients, and then build from there. And as you say, it it changed come March.
So what happened then in terms of the impact on your business? First of all, you're in Sydney, Australia. So when did it actually impact you and your business in Australia? And what was the impact as far as your clients that you had then?
Yeah, so it probably began the beginning of March for me. In fact, I have a very clear memory of the last time we went out for dinner, which was the 4th of March, because that's my daughter's birthday.
Right.
And so I think pretty much after that, we stopped going out and being a little bit on the cautious side, and have still remained that way. For me, from a work point of view, what it hasn't changed is the fact that, my wife and I both have our businesses working from home, and we've had that for many years. So that sort of circumstance didn't change things for me. I'm lucky I've got a separate office in the house, and it's separated from the living areas and everything. So coming into work has always been a separation from family life anyway, even though it's right there. So nothing changed in that respect for me. What actually changed was the pace of which things were moving. So, and what I found really interesting was, sort of observing generally a lot of businesses stalling, where I was, if anything, going at a faster rate than I had ever gone before. And part of that came down to Zoom. It was really interesting to me because 10 years ago when I started the business, the idea of working from home was still reasonably foreign to people. So you kind of hid the fact that you said, look, I've got a PO box and I sort of can work from here and there. You sort of pretended to have offices in places, and all these kind of serviced offices that exist as well, that you can use addresses and the like for that. And even before that, I was lucky enough that while I was employed, I actually spent a few years where I was working, a day or so a week from home. And reflecting on even further back, reflecting on the fact that when I started my career in radio and producing the overnight program at the time, meant that I got up at, 1 o'clock in the afternoon and prepared for the show from home. And I've actually got an article hidden somewhere away that was done on me in the Sydney Morning Herald, and this is back 20 plus years ago, of me with my feet in my parents' pool, pretending to be on a phone, and it wasn't a mobile in those days, making calls and getting people onto the program that was going to be on later that night. So the idea of working from home has always been something that's been familiar to me, but what I found really interesting is the perception that's changed in the business community has gone from it's impossible to work from home to it's possible, it's practical, it's real to work from home. And what that's actually changed for me is meetings. So if I look back in February, and I can see the amount of time I spent on the road traveling to meetings, and most of my clients were not that far away, but by the time you jump in the car and you park and you go to wherever you're going, like I was losing probably on average 2 hours a day in commuting back and forth from places. And I was having 5 days a week nearly having meetings outside. And what's changed is that I actually increased the amount of meetings I had, because everyone went, well, we can jump on Zoom and we can have a whole lot of people all together on Zoom, which was fantastic. So there was an increase in the amount of meetings and the frequency of them, and that has slowed a little bit now, and people are being a little bit more aware of time, I think, and particularly as they've headed back into offices. But I think that has opened up possibilities in the way it is, to the point where I actually sold my car. I'd already done very few kilometers on my car anyway because of the nature of working from home, and I sort of, we took a look at it and said, I don't think we need 2 cars anymore. So, and I think that's the nature of what's changed. So I've been lucky in a business sense that it also sorted out those people who are knocking on my door who were pretenders from the real people. Because what happened was that the pretenders just dropped away. And the real people were knocking at my door saying, we recognize the fact that if we are not marketing, we will not have a business. We need to do these fundamentals, and we need to work on all of the bits and pieces of marketing on an ongoing basis. And if you are not doing it in a low, that you're never going to do it. And I think it's one of the hard lessons that a lot of businesses are learning now, is that this analogy that the first thing to go is your marketing. When the budgets are tight, the marketing goes. It's the last thing that should go, to be honest. And I'm not saying that just to someone who's in marketing and wants to work with you. It's the reality, because if you're not communicating with if you're not listening and communicating with your audience, then how do you expect to still be in business?
Yeah, exactly right. When you talked about the transition of what happened with your customer base and also the elements of your own business activities, did that transition happen over days, weeks, hours? What was the transition time when it came to all these new practices of Zoom meetings and that taking place?
It was pretty quick, to be honest. You know, I remember almost as soon as everyone was kind of in that lockdown reality, I remember getting emails from people going, have you heard of this tool called Zoom? And I went, yeah, been using it for a while now, but great tool. And so, you know, I was remember helping a few people, you know, get online and learn how to connect with that. And what was, by the way, what was also been really interesting is how people have dropped their boundaries. So, you know, when you go to a formal one-on-one meeting, people are generally speaking, you know, well dressed and all the rest of it. Zoom meetings I found really fascinating, that people were sitting there in their kitchens, you know, in you know, shorts and a t-shirt or whatever, you know, casual clothing, really letting you into your home. You know, the kids would walk past and everything, and it's actually changed the nature of you know, funnily enough, even though we have that separation, it's actually changed that level of humanity that we have. You know, it's a lot more real in allowing people into your spaces. And I think that is a really important shift. You know, I've been very big over the years in pushing the idea of community. And I think the digital age of social media has pushed people away from what the real idea of community is. And community does involve getting to know people, and you can't do that just by social media, because social media is a snapshot of what I want you to see and what might be an ideal of what I want you to see. It's not really what exists. And getting to know people has in a community sense with shared values is really important. And I think those dropping of boundaries has actually helped cement relationships that I've had and built with, you know, existing and new clients in that period of time. So, you know, the pace picked up pretty quickly for me in terms of meetings, and in terms of the shift in who wanted to do things. You know, projects I'd been talking to people about for ages suddenly went from not sure when they're going to happen to let's do it now because we've got the time to do it.
Yeah, I would second a lot of what you've just said. And a funny anecdote around that is a friend of mine that I was talking to the other day. I said to him, you know, in the last 10 years, I've never been invited into your kitchen, and here I am speaking to you as you're making breakfast. And the whole dynamic of that conversation was very much more relaxed and informal. And we tend to think, you know, we tend to forget, I mean to say, that people are businesses, and when people go home, they're tending to be different than what they are in the walls of an office, right? Or behind the walls of an office. And I reiterate all the things that you've just talked about, because fundamentally we're getting to probably see people and hear people and act upon things that are happening now in a very different way than what we've been used to for many, many years.
It's the act of storytelling.
Yeah,
you know, that is a really important aspect of what I do, and what is incredibly important for any business, because often what separates one business from another is the story that they tell, and the story that you tell is about the people, because in the end, people do business with people. And yes, there are lots of little electronic products and things that we buy that are from nameless things, but when you're talking about, you know, real products and services that you invest in, it's about the people behind it. It's about their understanding of what you need and what to deliver and why they're doing it. You know, that story really brings people into the picture. And again, that gets back down to stuff that's basics that you need to work on. You know, there is an art form to being able to do it, but it is that level that people often neglect, and that relationship building is incredibly important. You know, that you know, often people will come to me and say, oh, you must have a huge database after 10 years of working you know, as an agency. And I said to them, actually, my database is incredibly tiny, for the simple reason that I hang on to my clients for long periods of time. You know, some of my clients are ongoing for several years. And so, which is something that I absolutely love, because it is about relationship building. It always has been for me, and adapting to different needs and understanding where they're at, where you're at, and working together.
Let's talk about the person behind your business then, because it's you. And the thing I'm interested to know, as I'm sure all the other people listening today, is when the COVID-19 pandemic hit Sydney and hit Australia and hit your business, how did you personally deal with it? Was there any amount of fear of what was going to happen with your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd be lying if you were in business and didn't say, I'm not sure what the future is going to hold. What can I do? And there was a moment of panic. You know, it was that, what is going to happen with my clients? You know, how are we going to, you know, shift that? And that was something that, you know, was, as I said, was a moment. And what I was really lucky was to have a mentor who quickly said, you have to turn off most of social media. You have to not pay attention to a lot of the news, and you have to focus on businesses that are around you that are staying positive, and look at what you can be doing and adapting to the different needs of the circumstances. And that changed, you know, my attitude to everything. And what's in my social media feed at the moment is not COVID related. It's about businesses being positive. You know, I just, because the algorithms work in that way, I stopped looking at those things. And, you know, I would get the updates from my family. It'd say, hey, you know, there's been X amount of cases today and all the rest of it. But I wasn't actively reading it, because I needed to stay in a positive mindset. And I think that was a big change. And the other was, as we sort of alluded to before, was recognizing that the pace was completely different. You know, that was the thing that struck me. And even now, looking back on it, is that, you know, that 3 or 4 month cycle was now a week or two. You know, it was, things were moving quickly, and I needed to move quickly, and at the same time needed to be focusing on what my business could offer, and accepting the fact that there were 1 or 2 clients who had to drop away for circumstances. But the majority of my clients stayed and picked up a few along the way as well, because, you know, I had adjusted that pace and blocked those things out. And I think that was a really important mindset, because, you know, you could see those levels of people going stir crazy, not sure how to work at home, not sure, you know, when they could get out, desperate to go somewhere, not sure what their business was doing, thinking the whole world was collapsing, you know, worried about paying the bills, all of these kinds of things, which were all normal. And I just tried to shut a lot of that out and stay as positive as possible.
Now, we've seen around the world governments stepping in and supporting businesses in all kinds of ways. What has happened for you in Australia in relation to either state or federal support for your business activities?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's been a significant amount of support that's been available to businesses in Australia, and I think that's been, a saviour for many. Certainly in the short term. Longer term is going to be interesting to see how that falls out, but certainly the idea of what we've had as a JobKeeper allowance, which has enabled, a support mechanism for staff members to be put in place. So there's I think it's $1,500 a fortnight that you can get for each individual staff member. That's for a period of 6 months. There have also been some other support mechanisms at a federal level to help with the tax time, and coming out in April and September. And I think also there's been a lot of grants on offer from state and federal government for different businesses to try and help support them along the way. So I think those that have been smart about and applying for those have got a great support mechanism. The challenge is definitely going to be when that stops, what happens, and there's a sense of the economy ready to fall off a cliff. Feeling from a lot of people. And I think it's about how people are going to be smart and make it last. And I think that there's going to need to be additional support. This is going to take a long time to recover. But I think as well, in many senses, the Australian economy, and I can't speak for the global economy, but the Australian economy, I think, needed a reset. Quite apart from COVID, I think, housing prices and general shopping prices and things have just been climbing at such a rapid rate. I look at my kids and wonder how they will ever afford to own a home. I'm not even sure how they'll even afford to rent a home, to live in, because the cost of living has been so high that, the opportunity to have some kind of reset, I think, was always going to be critical. And the fact that it's happened in this particular universal way, perhaps is a bright spot to come out of it. It will be, there will be some pain, absolutely, for sure there will be pain, but, hopefully there's some positives.
What have you learnt about yourself as a business owner and a business person during these times?
Support is the most important thing to have. It's easy to be a solo hero in good times, but you need the support around you. And as I mentioned before, I've got some great mentors. Also have a family who are around me and support me as well. And I think for me, it's been about keeping me in the right frame of mind. Knowing what I needed to be doing and thinking on those levels. That's a really important thing to happen. And I think as well, it's also been about, a spiritual side for me as well. I've always had that as an important element in my life, and large amounts of that have been linked to attending things in the past, and being able to attend those things stopped happening. And so the challenge for me was, do I just let it go, or do I try and find a way to do it myself? And I definitely took the latter, and have actually thoroughly enjoyed the learning journey that I've gone on as a result of it, and embraced the opportunity to do it a little bit differently for a period of time, and keep going on that journey. Because I think for me, it can't all be about work. There has to be a spiritual growth, a general educational learning growth. There has to be the support of family around you, as well as the business support. All of those elements contribute to success.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you going to change a lot about the way that you operate your business going forward? Is it kind of in a state of constant re-engineering at the moment? Because as you said, we haven't come out the other side yet, so we don't know what the even the short to medium term future looks like. So how are you strategizing as far as what your business is going to look like in 12 months from now?
Yeah, I think for me, it's actually a couple of the products that I had been thinking about, I think have a different application to perhaps how I originally intended them. And that's been great for me because I feel as though I'm sort of a step ahead with that. But I also recognize that the pace of change that's happening with business is going to continue. So and the way businesses operate today to the way they will operate in 5 years' time is going to be different again. And the challenge is thinking and working on how you're going to be one step ahead of that. And certainly that's at the forefront of my mind. And artificial intelligence is an area that intrigues me because it's largely speaking, it's not really involved that heavily in the marketing sector at the moment, but I think it will be, and on many different levels. And it's how you can get involved in some of those kinds of things, which I think is going to be important. And I think there are ways of building on my existing tools that I've built, which will carry it that way. And I think also what I've noticed a great shift in is the willingness of businesses to have partnership conversations. That's, it's less about being a competitor and more about how can we work together to both achieve our objectives. And sometimes it can be about someone who's in a very similar area to yourself, or it could be in someone who's a completely different area. And those conversations have been fascinating. And I think that willingness to be more open and indeed more global in your thinking. Again, that aspect of being a Sydney-based business was always something that people went, oh, you're in Sydney, you can't service us because we're in Brisbane. Why not? I mean, I've long had, I've had clients in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, one in the UK as well. It's, I can do business with anyone anywhere in the world, and Zoom proves that. And So the opportunities are actually significantly greater than they were before. It's about how you look at it and how you adapt to those things, as you say. And it's going to keep evolving for me. There's no doubt about it. It will keep evolving.
Yeah, I want to beat the collaboration drum for a minute, because I think it's such an important aspect of doing business, not only in these times. I think if you're open to collaboration, then doors open in all sorts of interesting ways. I was just talking to you, Anthony, before we went on air today about some of the things that are happening in the podcast world. I've actually formed 2 collaborations with guests that have been on this show with their businesses in the last 3 weeks. It's been phenomenal. And they've come out of opportunities where the guest said to me, hey, this is what I do. Is this something that we could align with, and let's do something innovative in this space? And one of them is actually a fashion designer in the United States, and we're doing up a wardrobe at the moment that I'm going to be able to wear on my podcast videos going forward, and he's going to be able to showcase his fashion in a completely different light.
I think it's amazing. I think that's and it is about people, as you say, it's about people thinking a little bit outside of the box as well, and those the idea of being an influencer is something that is intriguing, and one that people can take advantage of. I think that for the longest time, people thought influencers were celebrities, and they, so the Kim Kardashians of this world made an absolute mint out of wearing something for 2 seconds on their TV show, or putting it on their social media feed, because everyone was kind of looking for trying to get everybody really quickly. Let's go for the person who has millions of people following them, but it's actually not always about that. And there are subtle little things that you can do and have influences in lots of different ways. And I think that's a really interesting area, a really interesting thing of marketing, and it's a very low cost marketing exercise as well. It's I know someone who definitely is in that influencer market, who started off in school, and 2 sisters in school started off a food Instagram account, and it was just for a bit of fun early on, and they built up such a following that post school they can eat anywhere for free, because because the cost to a restaurant of them eating there is, next to nothing. And they put it on their feed, and they've got tens of thousands of followers, and they only need one person coming and saying, oh, I saw it on such and such a feed, so I'm coming here. That's one more person than they had before, so that they're in front. So it works really nicely. I mean, these sisters aren't trying to make a living out of it at the moment, but it's certainly something that works really well, and those influences are an important aspect of marketing, but the art of collaboration, and that's a small version of a collaboration, but I agree with you. Collaboration can happen in so many different ways, and I'm absolutely completely open to those things. I'm fascinated by it and look at opportunities to do that, and we talked off air as well about my background as far as intrigued as far as podcasting and things is concerned, so always open to those suggestions as well.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we're seeing at the moment, which is intriguing from a marketing perspective, is that this downtime that a lot of people have had, whether they've been unfortunately put off out of work or they've been working from home, and they've through that process found themselves a little bit more time where they're not having to commute into the office every day. People have started new hobbies, and as we all know, often hobbies can sometimes turn into businesses. And I've seen so many examples around the world where people have, started a new whatever it is thing in their spare time now that they've been at home for a while. I've got a friend in San Francisco who just took the camera out and started taking some photos, and she's just had a big gallery in San Francisco with her first exhibition. So, that's just happened in a few weeks, from picking up the camera and saying, I want to be a photographer and I'm going to take some photos. So I think that's another really interesting aspect of the marketing side, because when the hobby becomes serious, and I've got to say I did the same thing, I was getting a bit bored every day on my sailboat, and I thought, okay, I'll start doing podcasting, and here I am a year later, and I've got 3 podcast shows, right? So hobbies can very quickly turn into something serious.
What hobbies unlock, right? Really is hobbies are an insight into what you really enjoy, what really makes you happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you are not doing what really makes you happy in your business, it also will not be that successful. So it's not a surprise when people go away from what they are doing in their normal work life, pursue a hobby that suddenly becomes a business because it's a passion project. And that's what business should be about as well. I'm not doing marketing just because it's something to do. I've been fascinated by the idea of communicating with people and engaging with audience since as long back as I can remember. I remember I used to build little radio sets, and I remember listening to the cricket in the middle of the night from the UK, and being fascinated by how they were communicating what was going on, and it was more than just what was the play-by-play. It was what was happening in the crowd, and I still remember them talking about cakes being brought in and all this kind of stuff. And that fascination has always been there. That's always been the passion of mine, is that idea of communicating with people and bringing them information and bringing that one to give them something new, and that's why I do what I do. And I think it's the same thing when it comes to anyone with their passions, and that's where their businesses are so much more successful when that is the driving force behind it.
Yeah, totally right. Now, to wrap up today, I thought I'd give you a few minutes to talk about what impact do you think this whole experience we're having with the global pandemic is going to have on marketing within companies going forward. What's some of your advice around what marketing people should be doing right now, or people that are running businesses and having to look at their marketing strategy?
Well, I'll talk about it in 2 aspects. First is the internal aspect, because marketing is not just about marketing to get clients. It's actually marketing to your staff, to your boards, and whoever else is involved in your business, your suppliers. And I think the relationships that you build with those people have and should continue to change. I heard someone talking earlier this week and I challenged them on this, where they said, "Oh, it's all going to go back to normal. Everyone will be back in the office 9 to 5 because you can't work from home." And I went, "No, that's not what's going to happen. It's not a work from home or a be in the business. It's actually a blend between the two. If, for example, you're parents of 2 kids who are in school, it doesn't have to be that one is one or the other. It actually, what I think is actually an ideal scenario, because it's been proven that people can work from home, is that we're going to be in a situation where someone's going to say, I'm going to work in the office from 8 till 2:30. I'll be home to pick the kids up from school, or when the kids get home from school, and I'll work from 3 till 6 at home. And I'll do that 2 days a week this week, and next week I'll do it 3 days a week, and my partner will do the reverse of it. And I think unless you are adapting to what your staff needs and realizing, the most fascinating thing that happened during COVID was, particularly during the warmer months, was looking outside and seeing how many people were going out for a walk, and they were, and as families. And I think people have realized that is what is actually important. And if you as a boss are not realizing that is an important aspect for your staff, you'll lose your staff going somewhere else where they can do that. So I think that's a really important marketing exercise internally. And I think externally, it's really about the fact that, meetings can be had on Zoom. That is an important part of it. But I think also it's about opening up markets and building relationships. And I think that's a really important learning from it, is saying that relationship building is super critical. Telling stories is super critical. People were quick to jump on and put COVID-related messages here, there, and everywhere because everybody was doing it. But you need to be carrying messages to your audiences on a regular basis, not just about COVID, about anything. And I think it's getting a lot more personal with your messages and a lot more directed, and recognizing you need multiple messages. Not, the biggest mistake that gets made in marketing is, by businesses who believe they can do it themselves, is they try to be everything to everybody. And so they carry one messages instead of recognizing that they have lots of audiences, each requiring a slightly different message.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of fantastic advice there, Anthony. We're going to leave it at that for today. Thank you very much for joining me on the Global Business Podcast. It's been a great chat. And anybody out there listening, I'm going to be putting all of Anthony's contact details in the show notes today, so you can get in touch with him and get a marketing guru to help you out. And I'm sure Anthony would welcome any partnerships or collaborations at this time. So, all good. Thank you very much, Anthony.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Terrific. There we are. My guest today has been Mr. Anthony Perl from Sydney in Australia, a marketing guru, talking about all the things that have happened to his business prior to COVID-19, as well as what he's experienced during COVID-19 with him and his customers. Plenty of marketing tips there, so if you want to get in contact with Anthony, please check out the show notes. I've put the links to where you can reach out to him. If you're looking for more episodes from the Global Business Podcast, head over to our website at theglobalbusinesspodcast.com. You'll find all of our previous episodes there from business leaders and business owners across the world, talking about how they're navigating their way through the waters of COVID-19 and beyond. If you're looking to download the podcast, you can get it from all your usual places: Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify. They're all there, so you can download them and listen to them in your own free time. Also, if you're looking for more podcasts from myself, check out globaltravelchannel.com and humanity.com, humanety.com. You'll find over 180 podcast episodes there, talking about both travel and inspiring stories from human beings across the world. There we go. I'll be back soon with another episode from the Global Business Podcast. My name is Mark Philpott. Until then, stay safe, stay well, and stay busy with business.